good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to the NAACP Health Committee's web series, COVID Conversations. My name is LaShonda Davis, and I am a member of the NAACP Health Committee Richmond, California branch. This evening, we'll be in conversation with Mr. Travis Margain. Mr. Margain is a native of Richmond, California. He attended De Anza High School and studied biological sciences at University of California at Davis. After leaving UC Davis, Mr. Margain worked in the private sector at Dow Chemical and UC Davis Laboratories with a focus in agriculture research. One of the research areas was autoimmune diseases. He also served as the regional manager for Central Valley and San Francisco County Public Housing, working with those who encounter housing insecurity. It is a pleasure to be in conversation with you, Mr. Margain. Welcome. Hello. How are you doing today?
I am fine. Thank you very much for having me.
Are you nervous? Is this okay?
No, I'm quite comfortable.
Okay.
And really excited about doing this interview process.
All right. Fantastic. So let's get started.
Okay.
So talk a little bit about your journey living with your condition.
Okay. I am a diabetic, type 2, and it's been quite a journey, I should say the least. I first discovered that I was a diabetic, I want to say early 2001. My blood sugar count at that time was 455, and I was visiting my godson's parents, and they were like, "What's going on with you?" I said, "I had this headache." We took my blood sugar count. It was 455. I went to the emergency and they couldn't believe that I was standing. I felt perfectly fine. They ended up giving me some insulin shots. I stayed there for an additional 4 hours for observation, and then they let me go home. I made an appointment with my primary care provider, and that's when we did multiple testing just to see where I was at the time. I shared my history with him in terms of my family, which my father, who passed away with it in 93 at the age of 48, and his father in 99 at 67. There was none of those traces on my mother's side of the family, although they had high blood pressure and suffered from heart attacks. Both her parents passed away in 85 and 88 with those symptoms. So at the time, I was only placed on some medication pills. Went away very quickly, didn't have any issues. I continued exercising and doing the activities that I was doing, which really kept everything down. But then again, it appeared in 2014 during Christmas. The week of Christmas, I looked as if, I kid you not, was having triplets. That's how huge I was. And I went to the emergency only to find that they immediately admitted me into the hospital. And from that moment, for the next 3 weeks, my body went through a tremendous transformation. Up and down with every aspect of vital signs within my body did not balance whatsoever. Diarrhea was something that constantly happened as equal as I was sleeping. That's how bad it was. And it took 3 weeks before they were able to get my vitals and every aspect of, I guess, everything in my body to even look somewhat normal. At that time, my A1C count was over 15. And that's where this horrific, I do mean that, journey started. It was like being in a complete nightmare. I couldn't believe how physically, how much I changed in terms of my stomach area, my legs and feet. I weighed at the time 190, and I went from 190 to, I believe it was 257, which was a lot of water content that stayed within my body. I lost all ability to produce urine and release, and dialysis started immediately. Oh no, I take that back. Dialysis didn't start until a year and a half later after being released. So that first time I was in the hospital for 4 weeks. The second time, I would say it was 8.5 months later, I was there for 3 weeks. And then 2 months after that, I was in there for a week. And then that's where my life changed drastically. Uh-oh, something happened. I no longer hear you, Miss
Okay,
Davis. There you go.
thank you. Wow, so that is remarkable.
Yes, it
I'm
is.
glad that they found out what was happening to you, because so many
Yes,
people don't um,
that
discover
is so true.
actually have diabetes. So, Mr. Margain, can you scoot your chair back just a little for the phone so I can get your face? Yes,
Oh, okay, I'm
there we
sorry.
go.
Is that better?
Yes, that's perfect. So, the next question. So, you mentioned kidney dialysis. Can you talk a little bit about what the process of kidney dialysis involves? What is it? How frequent do you go?
Sure. So once the doctors determined that dialysis was required, prior to that, I was able to be released from the hospital, and I was still producing urine. So as I stated, it was 2015, and I want to say midway into 2016, I started to not produce as much urine as I was before. I went to see my primary, and that's when my kidneys started to fail. Um, the specialist, my kidney doctor, then recommended that dialysis was something that should happen immediately. So when I was submitted to the facility for treatment, we started off with 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for 4 hours, starting at 4 o'clock in the morning. Being there at 4 o'clock, I tell you, that was a challenge, sometimes getting up. But the process in that was the first day I attended, no one told me that I would have these 4.5-inch needles inserted into my arm where my fistula had been placed in. I had no idea that that was going to happen. So when we first made an attempt, I was horrified with the needles because I don't like them, and they could not find the actual fistula that had been placed in my arm to even start the flow. So I had to go to the emergency room to have a catheter placed into my chest. And that was a 2.5-hour surgery. I was released, and then the process began. They took the inserts of the tubing and placed it in my chest to remove my blood and fluid in what they consider, what they call a cleaning cleanser. And what that does is one aspect of the machine draws the water and blood out of my system. It cleans all the impurities and then pushes the clean blood back into my system. I was told that I would be extremely fatigued. In the beginning, I was not. The first 5 months went very well. The 8th month, however, I started to feel very exhausted. after treatment, to the point where I could barely stand to give them a blood pressure reading, let alone walking to the car became a challenge. Walking up a flight of stairs was more than a challenge, where I would take at least 4 to 5 attempts and have to stop where I was, recover, and then continue. This went on for the first year and a half on treatment. And as time went by, I experienced some of the things that other patients did, which is extreme fatigue during treatment and off. As I stated, I would be on for the duration of 4 hours. I would come home, eat something, and immediately fall asleep. That would happen where the naps in between, as I call them, would be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, wake back up, eat again, and I was knocked out once again. This went on for several months, and I would want to say probably around a year and a half after starting treatment, did my body begin to, I guess, adjust to the activities that were taking place. And I was allowed at that point to start, as I say, living life again, which meant walking up the stairs without being out of breath, feeling like I ran a marathon. Being able to go to the store alone. The very first year and a half, I could not drive. I could not be anywhere alone. I had to use a walker. What else? I always had to have someone with me. I had to give up my independence and move out of my home and move in with my parents. I had to have someone around in the event that I had a relapse. I didn't know what that was supposed to feel like or even what it looked like until one day I happened to be alone watching television. Everything was perfect. And the next thing I know, I felt extremely thirsty and very weak. I made it myself to the kitchen, to the refrigerator. And then the next thing I know, I was on the floor. I had blacked out. I woke up. I don't even know how long I was there, and I could barely move. And it felt like the life within me was leaving. I recall hitting the floor several times, making noise, and the neighbor who lived underneath my parents in their condo came upstairs. His wife apparently, and I didn't know this at the time, had went through the same thing and had suffered a stroke, and she's paralyzed. So he was able to detect that something was perhaps happening. And he came upstairs, and when he rung the doorbell, I could not move. I yelled out, and I was there. It seemed like forever. It kind of went back and forth. And somehow along the line, I called out and said, God, help me get up. And I kid you not, something felt like it just lifted me. I went to the door. I was able to open the door. He came in, they called 911. And after that, I really thought I was dying. I couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't see. My life within me, and I refused and said, I'm not going to let this beat me. And by the time the paramedics got there and took my blood sugar count, it was 22. And they could not believe that I was alive and I was not in a coma or brain dead, for that matter. I could barely speak, but I was very aware of everything around me as they proceeded to ask me several questions in terms of the year, the date, how old I was, where I was at, just trying to see where I was. And then they took me into the ambulance, and they proceeded to give me some type of shot. And I recall them telling me that it was like having sugar water, as they explained it to me. They gave me 4 of them, and they did not affect me whatsoever. By the time that I reached the hospital, I want to say it may have been about 2 hours after I was there that I actually started coming back to my senses. That experience from 2007 up to now has occurred 4 times. And the ranges was 22 being the lowest, up to 28. And on all occasions except for one, I was with someone, luckily, when that occurred. Just recently, last week, 87 was my sugar level count as I was watching my favorite television show, Law and Order. And I felt out of nowhere as if I was drowning. I know what that feels like. I got up, took the sugar count, and that's what it was. It took 40 minutes after eating some chocolate, drinking a whole 12 ounces of orange juice, and eating 5 peppermints that I started to feel somewhat normal. And then I had a large dinner. The problem with having diabetes for most people is that you constantly have to eat snacks and monitor yourself throughout the day. However, I happen to be that special child where I could be doing those things. However, my body would go the opposite. So I don't get forewarnings. I experience the downfall, and that's how I know things are off. That happens with my blood sugar levels, with my blood pressure. It's one of those things. And there's so many days that I go through having absolutely no problems whatsoever. You wouldn't even know. And then it's those unexpected times that come up. So I'm constantly on guard and have to watch. Currently, right now, as you see me, if you were to see me right now, I look pretty normal in terms of my weight. But actually, I'm about, I would say, 15 pounds under what I should be. I've lost a lot of muscle tone. I went from weighing 195 with a lot of muscle down to 143, now back up to 180. So that gives you an idea of where my body weight has fluctuated and how I would appear physically when people would see me that hadn't seen me in quite some time. That's what dialysis treatment is. I'm happy to say, though, although I've been doing this since 2017 and I'm still currently doing it, I don't have those types of experiences. However, the treatment itself takes me through a series of times where I cramp a lot in my calves, my stomach, and in my arms. And I will tell you, the only way that I can explain the pain is that think of getting a Charlie horse. From those who have ran track, they know what that is, or pulling a hamstring, and intensify that by 10. I kid you not. There have been times that tears have strung down my face because I'm in that much pain. And the only thing that you can do is breathe because there's nothing you can do. Oxygen tanks, if you have them, will help allow you to breathe better, but it takes time for that muscle to relax. And as I develop more of my muscle tone, the harder it is to go through and recover when I'm going through those processes. But the one thing that I can say that has really helped me the most is just having the attitude that I have and the team of providers, health providers that I have working with me.